Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1982. We're going to be taking a look at April Wine and they're going to be playing through Sign of the Gypsy Queen. So let's get the guys up on screen and see how they get on.
Shout aloud to let it fly while the darkness can help the light. 'Cause trouble's coming without control, and no one's staying, it's got a hold. Barely, in the words of the Gypsy Queen. The sign of the Gypsy Queen. I beg you, leave to me. A word I want to know. Deep, now you know, then you know. We'll get my saddle tied on, 'cause western wind do is fast and strong, and jump on back he is good and long, and we'll resist till we reach the dawn. 'Cause running seems like the best defense, and staying just don't make any sense. 'Cause no one could ever stop it now. Sure the cards of the gypsy town. The sign of the Gypsy Queen. A beg your delivery. A word I don't want to know. Leave, I know that it goes.
I'm just going to jump in here just before they're about to get engulfed by the dry ice. First of all, getting into that extended intro by Gary Moffat, because he has a very deliberate delay that's set on there, and he's also using a volume pedal in order to fade in the notes. And this is something that you'll see sometimes players doing on their guitar when they use the volume on their guitar just to fade it in and out. Whereas Gary's using a pedal, and the delay is intentionally intentionally thrown in there so that the notes that repeat on the delay can harmonize with the notes that he's playing at the time. And it gives a really cool effect in terms of building the atmosphere and not throwing too much information at you in terms of a million notes a second. It's all really deliberately worked out, and it's just setting the stage for the rest of the track to then come in. And when it does come in, how tight is the band all together, and the full sound that we get, which is all due to the fact that we have 3 guitars on stage. And I know that as a band, April Wine had a fair few changes in terms of personnel, but here, having those 3 guitars, I think in 1977 is when they had the addition of Brian Greenway, who added that extra guitar and could give them that extra dimension as well. But quickly back to the intro, where Gary has this little bit of tapping that he throws in there, and it's really interesting because it's not tapping for melody, it's tapping for effect, for the sound that it gives after fading it in, so that you don't hear the taps, you just hear the delay of the taps. Build the atmosphere, give a slightly different sound, give you something different in the intro because it keeps everybody's attention. But how many times have you seen a guitarist with their tone bathed in delay, but it's for no reason, because they just go off shredding and the notes get lost in the delay, it just becomes a bit of a mess, whereas the top players always use effects to embellish the sound. They don't rely on the effects to make them sound better. And that's exactly the case in this particular track with Gary, because he's setting the scene for the forthcoming performance and just building that atmosphere. And April Wine, another example of a Canadian band that just made a great sound live, whether it be a 3-piece or a 4-piece or a 5-piece. These Canadian bands in the 70s and the 80s were so good live, no exception here. And the reason we're getting that great full sound of the 3 guitars, because it means we've got the luxury of a rhythm guitar that can play throughout the whole track, and then if you want to have it, 2 lead guitars harmonizing with each other. And there's so many places you can take the music when you've got those 3 guitars. And especially going clean in the verses, you can hear how we really take a step back compared to the intro, and we have that classic picking chorus sound, which really does help to bring that sound down, especially in hard rock. It's such a classic sound a lot of bands went to them. When you can go into the chorus and have 3 guitars that kick on the overdrive, it's going to give you such a dramatic change. And whenever you're looking at a band and in the description you've got 3 backing vocalists, you know that you're in for a treat, because there are going to be so many melodic options those singers can explore. And you're in for a treat if it's a great band. Obviously, if it's not a great band and not with great singers, it's going to be a bit of a mess. But there's no problem here because we've got great vocalists on show. But let's get back into the performance.
Evil seems to be everywhere. Hate the spirit that brought despair. 'Cause trouble's coming without control, and no one's staying that's got a hold. Hurricane in the valleys, in the winds of the gypsy queen. The time of the gypsy queen, a peculiar leave. A word of a woman who loves, a deed how you know that you love. The sign of the gypsy queen, a peculiar leave.
there we have it. I think in that track, we've pretty much got everything that you could want. We've got a drum solo right at the end there, and also we've got individual lead guitar solos, and then something that emphasized the point that I made earlier, having the option to go to that dual lead guitar sound, but also have that rhythm guitar still going, so the full sound is just maintained throughout the whole track. And just quick shout out to Jerry Mercer on drums as well, just absolutely solid throughout the whole track, keeping it all together and not pushing tempo and not losing tempo, always straight, full ahead, keeping that drive going throughout the whole performance. Also, I just want to mention about Miles Goodwin as well, on the vocals, but also playing at the same time, picking out some of those verse chords as well. And Miles doesn't miss a trick here when the harmonies come in as well. The other guys on backing vocals, you've got Gary in there as well, and Brian, they really do back up, and Steve as well on bass, and that's Steve Lang, by the way. They really do back up that lead vocal so well, so Miles has that luxury of having other guys harmonizing with him in key. And this is the other thing about watching a live band. This is a great live show. The Dry Ice was really cool, and we got all those lead sections, but also knowing it's live and hearing that lead vocal, and sometimes it might be a touch flat, but it's not a disaster, and I prefer to hear that, to know that it's live rather than hearing a vocal that is just snapped perfectly to the note. And it's one of those things that when you do a lot of production yourself, you instantly can hear auto-tune, and it just, for me, turns me off with any performance that I'm listening to as soon as you hear that vocal snap to a note. And April Wine were one of those bands that hit the ground running in Canada with their first release, their first album called April Wine, and the first single released from that album was called Fast Train, and that did really well. It got a lot of radio airplay. It also established Miles as the main songwriter, and the record label, because of the success, wanted them to do another album straight away. It just so happened in the 70s they did an album in 71, 72, 73, 75, 76, 77, 78 and 79, so they were certainly busy throughout that 70s period, really were striking while the iron was hot. So the follow-up album in 1972 was called On Record, and the first single released from that album was actually a cover of a Hot Chocolate track called You Could Have Been a Lady, and that did really well. It got to number 2 in the Canadian charts and also stayed in the US charts for 11 weeks in total. So after the success of that first single, they released the second single, which was called Bad Side of the Moon. And the interesting thing about this track is that it was actually written by the songwriting powerhouse that is Elton John and Bernie Taupin. So On Record, the album was certified gold in Canada, and the guys got straight back into the studio to ride this wave of success. And in 1975, their album called Stand Back went 2 times platinum in Canada, and pretty much from the mid-70s into the 80s, they had a steady stream of albums that either went platinum or gold in Canada, and in 1981, their album called The Nature of the Beast went platinum in the USA as well. So they released 4 albums in the 80s, 2 in the 90s, and 2 in the noughties as well. And the great thing about these guys is that they were signed throughout the 70s and 80s to an independent label called Aquarius in Canada. And it wasn't until the 90s that they signed with MCA for 3 albums, and the final album in 2006 called Roughly Speaking, that was with Universal. But a great performance here from the guys, and that classic hard rock sound that is achieved with those 3 guitars having the ability to go to those dual lead with rhythm in the background, but also the harmonies. And that is something that all the great hard rock bands had, that ability to harmonize with each other live. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.